Sir.
John Snow, Channel 4 News. Saida, very early in the post-Brexit era, Liam Fox went to the Philippines and exchanged a view that Britain and the Philippines lived in shared values. This from a man who has sanctified the extrajudicial killing of many thousands of his own citizens. And Mrs. May went to Saudi Arabia. I wondered to what extent Britain's relationship with Saudi Arabia, how it affects the Muslim community. You talk about the enemy within, but what about the enemy without, the export of Wahhabism, the very deliberate export of Wahhabism?
I think there are two bits to this question, John. First of all, I think there is a sense of, is there a specific theological or version of Islam which is more uniquely violent than any other? And one of the arguments that I make as somebody who's from a mixed Sunni Shia background and who was brought up in a Deobandi Tablighi Jamaat mosque, we were practically everything was thrown at us as kids. I don't believe that there is one sect which is uniquely more likely to produce more terrorists, because if you take, for example, the most recent example of the man who went from Bradford up to Glasgow to kill the shopkeeper, I mean, he was from a Sufi Barelvi background, so as far apart from Wahhabism as you could possibly find. And so I'm always quite cautious about saying, you know, it was a time when it was quite fashionable to say not all Wahhabis are terrorists, but all terrorists are Wahhabi. And I'd say, well, that's complete nonsense, because actually you can be a terrorist and you could be from any sect, or, you know, you could be of no faith and you could be a terrorist. The second part to that question, I think, which I find more worrying, and I talk about it in this book, is that the government currently has a policy of disengagement with certain groups because of its ideological positions. One of the group, for example, government will never visit a Wahhabi mosque. Government will not engage with Wahhabi inspired organizations. Government will not have Wahhabis around the table in domestic foreign policy making. And if you are, say, a person who goes to a Wahhabi mosque in Birmingham, and you're a young man and you're basically being told your version is unacceptable, but then we have our Prime Minister paying homage to the home of Wahhabi Islam, it's sending out a really interesting message. And so what we have to say is either Wahhabism is bad, full stop, and we believe they are the cause of the problem, and then for that reason we have to temper our relationship or pivot our relationship with Saudi Arabia, or we have to say actually Wahhabi Islam per se is not bad, and that we have to deal with people individually on individual views and beliefs. And if that's the case, why are we disengaging swathes of British Muslims who may be following that view? And I say that as somebody who, you know, who had huge concerns about our relationship with Saudi Arabia. So that's about as high as I can put it publicly. So in that sense, you know, in that, you know, I was the only minister who raised the issue of the use of capital punishment with the Justice Minister. I was the only minister who sat in the heart of, you know, Islam. In Mecca, I sat with the heads of the Holy Mosque and talked about freedom of religion and belief, much to the horror of my civil servants. But, you know, so therefore I felt it was important to have these very honest conversations. And I just feel that the domestic element of that is more worrying for me, because it's sending out very, very mixed messages to, you know, what we're basically saying is if you're a British Muslim and you're Wahhabi, you're off limits, but if you're a Saudi Muslim and you're Wahhabi, you're fine.